Thank you, Jane. Let me take it. I don't actually think I need it for this session. So our next session is Defending and Strengthening Democracy, a view from Washington. And we're going to kick off this session with first some pre-recorded remarks from State Department, from Uzra, Zeya, the Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights at the Department of State. So I think that will come up here to you.
Thank you for inviting me to address you today. I want to acknowledge Anders Fogh Rasmussen for his leadership on this initiative. Around the world, democracies are coming together to face emerging threats and address modern-day challenges. While we have all read the reports chronicling democratic decline and the negative effects of authoritarian regimes, I am here to reaffirm that democracies matter and can deliver, especially when we work together. A newly released survey conducted by the Edelman Trust Barometer provided us with some good news and momentum on our efforts to advance democracy and safeguard human rights. This survey revealed that people in the United States, UK, Germany, and France reported notably higher levels of confidence in their democratic institutions in May compared to January 2022. This should give us all some encouragement about our collective efforts to counter authoritarianism and its ill effects on the world. It may be hard to have optimism about democracy as we witness the grave consequences of unchecked power and the purge of dissenting voices. Vladimir Putin's premeditated, unprovoked, and unjustified war of aggression against Ukraine and brutal crackdown on civil society and media within Russia are unconscionable. Russia's actions seek to destabilize an entire continent and pose a threat to our post-World War II international order. However, we are not idle bystanders. In an unprecedented show of solidarity, the global community has moved boldly and quickly to meet Ukraine's defensive and humanitarian needs. Also, we've come together to isolate Putin and his cronies by holding them accountable for their unjustified war and human rights abuses. Much of this work is being led by governments across the world who came together in President Biden's historic Summit for Democracy. Together, we are supporting the millions of individuals displaced within Ukraine or made refugees by Putin's war of choice. Additionally, many summit participants are documenting atrocities and human rights abuses to promote accountability of perpetrators. Today, Russia is more politically isolated than ever before. In the 47-member UN Human Rights Council, only Eritrea joined Russia in voting against a new commission of inquiry that will document the ongoing violations of human rights and international humanitarian law in Ukraine. Building on this milestone, we will use every tool available to hold the Russian government, its enablers in Belarus, and Russian oligarchs who have profited from Russia's corrupt and violent regime accountable. As we work together to support Ukraine, the global community continues its efforts to safeguard democracies around the world. One way we're doing this is through the 700+ Summit for Democracy commitments made by governments. Through different engagements during this year of action, governments, along with civil society and the private sector, are joining forces to discuss, review, and implement summit pledges. Thus far, Kosovo has created a Presidential Council on Democracy and Human Rights. Norway and Ghana have supported the Global Disability Forum. Estonia held a global conference on media freedom. Belgium launched a public survey on the organization of the government. And Botswana will host a regional democracy summit in July. Moreover, the U.S. government is pursuing the commitments we made in the Presidential Initiative for Democratic Renewal. As part of this effort, we are supporting programs, initiatives, and organizations focused on advancing technology and democracy, bolstering democratic reformers, fighting corruption, defending free and fair elections and political processes, as well as supporting free and independent media. In addition to pursuing our efforts, we've also engaged with partners and allies to bolster the work of multi-donor consortia and coalitions, such as the Media Freedom Coalition and Global Anti-Corruption Consortium. This Copenhagen Summit exemplifies what was envisioned for the Year of Action, bringing together governments, civil society, and private sector, not to admire the problem, but to act with urgency to develop and execute solutions. As I mentioned at the top of my remarks, this work is not easy. In virtually every corner of the world, journalists and civil society actors are under assault. Even governments are targeted and maligned for supporting other democracies. But as we've seen this year, together we are stronger. Thank you for your engagement and support to strengthen democracies around the world. Let's maintain the momentum of our Summit for Democracy and this summit gathering to continue to put words into action and showcase how democracies deliver for their citizens.
Thank you. Great. Join me in thanking Undersecretary Uzra Zeya. Unfortunately, she was not able to be here because there's another summit, the Summit of the Americas, that she's joining with the President. But greatly enough, we have with us today that I can introduce Rob Berschinski, directly from the White House, Special Assistant to the President, Senior Director for Democracy. Rob, great to have you.
Thank you, Jonas.
Come and join us here. So we're glad that we're able to have you on stage. We, of course, feel a sort of strong link here in the Alliance of Democracy with President Biden's democracy agenda. He stood here as then Vice President in 2018 and made the inaugural speech here at the Copenhagen Democracy Summit. And now, as President, has sort of strengthened the democracy agenda. But before we turn to that, I want to ask you about the President and the administration's actions on Ukraine. We've been discussing Ukraine all day. We've had President Zelensky speak here, many other leaders on that topic. And of course, the view from Washington is vitally important. So please take us through that.
Great. Thanks, Jonas. And hi, everybody. I think it's worth reviewing quickly, given how fast-moving events of the recent months have been, where we were just late in 2021. U.S. intelligence was showing clearly that President Putin had designs on re-invading Ukraine. And we told the world about it. And most importantly, we went to the Kremlin, sent senior envoys to the Kremlin and said, we know what you want to do here. Here's what we're going to do about it. And we tried to head off this war. It was obviously unsuccessful. In the meantime, the U.S. government, together with partners all over the world in the wake of the invasion, has delivered the most sophisticated weaponry to the government of Ukraine. We've imposed crushing economic sanctions and also put personal sanctions on oligarchs and other Russian elites, making clear that you're not going to be able to profit from kleptocracy and repression and be able to spend that money in the West with governments that abide by the rule of law in the way that you don't at home. We've provided billions of dollars in humanitarian assistance and foreign assistance, matched only by the generosity of various European governments who are taking in those millions of Ukrainians forced from their homes by this war of choice. And in my lane directly, we've really invested in what we're calling the European Democratic Resilience Initiative, or EDRI, which is hundreds of millions of dollars in new funding that's going towards supporting activists and anti-corruption campaigners and journalists, certainly in Ukraine, making sure that they're protected and able to do their jobs, but also to the people of the region, to the people that have been forced out, given the Kremlin's repression at home from Russia and from Belarus, and from other frontline states, the Baltic states and Moldova, among others. So we're really investing in the people that are going to make for a more positive future. Now, contrast that with what we've seen out of Russia. Of course, extraordinary repression at home, war crimes and atrocities in the country, in Ukraine, increasing lies about the nature of a real food security crisis that's going to be increasingly important for governments and peoples around the world. So on this front, and I imagine we heard about this morning, we need to be very clear that it's not sanctions imposed by the West that are adding to the food insecurity crisis. We've been very deliberate and clear in structuring our sanctions to make sure that goods like fertilizers and wheat are not covered under the sanctions programs. What is impacting global food security is a blockade of Black Sea ports and reports of Russians stealing grain and taking it back home. But we need to be very diligent in terms of beating back this continued propaganda, and we're looking forward to doing so with our partners. But we all need to be carrying that message. So just in conclusion on this, I mean, the key is the world moves on, but it can't move beyond the courage of the people of Ukraine and the government. There are many pressing challenges out there. We need to be able to take them on while continuing to support people like President Zelensky and the people he represents.
Thanks, Rob. So next I want to take you to the even broader question of President Biden has talked of this area as one sort of defined by democracy versus autocracy. And that's sort of our period. If that's the case, which of course also something that we see the world in the same sort of prism here at the Alliance of Democracies Foundation, but what does that mean for what type of then closer cooperation between democracies do we need? There have been others here that have spoken, I think it was the Prime Minister of Lithuania, saying that this is the same when there's a war, you need kind of new institutions afterwards to rebuild. What is it among democracies? I mean, we, of course, that's the whole name called Alliance of Democracies. That's what we're advocating for, but you also have your initiative with President Biden's Global Summit for Democracy, which right now has just been so far just one meeting. I know there's like the ongoing actions that Undersecretary Zeya also outlined, but it would be great to have us sort of walk you through that.
Great.
Walk us all of us through that.
So the contest between autocracy and democracy is incredibly heartfelt by President Biden. He speaks in exactly those terms, and so it was no surprise that he was on this stage 5 years ago. So first off, thank you for everything you're doing. We do see events like this as very much part and parcel with that challenge. The president is also clear that this is one challenge of many. We are laser focused on preventing the current pandemic or ending the current pandemic, I should say, and preventing the next one, and on climate change. But this struggle for the soul of democracy, as he likes to call it, is fundamental to the entire Biden agenda, both domestically, where we have our own challenges, and we've been very clear and humble on that front, and also internationally. So that was really the underlying concept that spurred the Summit for Democracy in December. I'll take a little bit of issue with the idea that it's just one meeting, and let me explain why. So it's true that in December, 100 world leaders from every corner of the planet, together with members of civil society and senior members of the business community and Democratic opposition members, gathered virtually. What they did there, as you heard from my colleague Uzra, was made, I think the statistic she put out was 700 commitments. And we are following up on each and every one of those right now, together with our partners. I've been traveling around Europe over the course of the week, and it's just remarkable to have these conversations with different governments where they're telling us, here's what we're doing in follow-up to our Summit for Democracy commitment. And it's not just happening in Europe. You know, we're hearing it from countries as disparate as Nepal and Dominican Republic, and Uzra mentioned a few as well. So we're calling this year, and it's probably going to be a little bit more than 12 months, so don't take us literally, but we're calling the year a year of action in the lead up to the second summit, which we hope to hold in early 2023. And being in the meetings, President Biden and our National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, are raising these issues across the board. So we're really excited about everything that the summit is going to bring. And again, we see gatherings like this one and many being put together by our partners, including the Danish government, importantly, as part and parcel of what we're doing. Now, in terms of structures, the Biden administration has been very clear from day one that core to our foreign policy strategy is building out partnerships and alliances. So we don't necessarily see one alliance for democracy, but we see many groupings as key to building the future that we collectively want. So that means working through pre-existing groupings like NATO and the G7, and there's a very important summit coming up in just a few days with our NATO allies and G7 partners. And then it's building new groupings. So the Summit for Democracy is very much a part of that, and we are spinning off from the summit democracy cohorts focused on individual thematic areas, technology and democracy, corruption and human rights, and so on and so forth, but also building other new structures, AUKUS and the Quad with our partners in the Indo-Pacific. And so we very much want to build partnerships around the world rooted in our common values, and that's the way forward as we see it.
No, that's great, and that's actually what we've been trying as well to contribute to. I mean, we see ourselves, of course, as part of your year of action as well, and maybe we're midterm, as you say, you can't promise exactly when the next summit is going to be. Maybe we're a little bit before, halfway there. And the same with, as we heard earlier on stage, where Anders Fogh Rasmussen presented our proposal for an economic Article 5. The idea is basically saying a lot of democracies are being subject to this authoritarian economic coercion. This is a problem. We want to find the solutions among democracies. That's been one of our suggestions that we're also happy, to put into a democracy cohort and work with other partners like Lithuania in particular that's been subject to this from China. So that's precisely, so great to be working with you on this.
Uzra laid out the many challenges we face. There's so much work to be done, and we're looking for good ideas across the board and looking forward to working with you.
Great. I want you all to join me in thanking Rob Berschinski from the White House. Thanks, guys.